It was one of those mornings when the sky hung low, heavy with a pale gray that seemed to promise trouble. I had dressed sharply, my shoes polished to a quiet shine, my watch ticking steadily on my wrist. There was no special reason for the outfit, at least not one I was ready to tell anyone, but I like to keep appearances neat. I stepped into the building lobby, the familiar scent of lemony floor polish hanging in the air. The echo of my footsteps carried across the glossy marble tiles as I headed toward the elevator. I had no reason to expect what would happen next. Across the lobby, behind the front desk, she spotted me. Linda. Everyone knew Linda, the self-appointed queen of the building. She wasn't technically the property manager, but she had taken it upon herself to police everyone who stepped inside. From residents to delivery drivers to guests, Linda had a knack for finding a reason to tell you were breaking some building rule you'd never actually heard of. She was the type to wear a blazer 3 sizes too small, as if holding herself together with sheer willpower and attitude. I could tell she was in one of her moods. She straightened her posture, squared her shoulders, and locked eyes on me like a hawk spotting prey. She marched from behind the desk, her heels clicking in sharp, authoritative beats. "You can't be here," she announced, not in a polite whisper, but in that faux customer service tone laced with superiority. I didn't bother responding. I kept walking toward the elevator, which seemed to irritate her even more. Before I knew it, she was in front of me, blocking my path. She planted herself firmly, chin lifted. She started rattling off some nonsense about unauthorized access and violating security protocols. Her voice carried just enough to make sure everyone within earshot, 2 residents checking mail, a man waiting for the elevator, could hear her dressing me down. It didn't matter that I had a keycard. It didn't matter that I'd been in this building hundreds of times before. She waved her manicured hand dismissively when I tried to flash it. She was on a mission. And then, the real performance began. Linda claimed she had already reported me, and that I was now officially terminated from the premises. Terminated. As if I'd been some employee under her command. She even threatened to call security if I didn't leave quietly. The residents in the lobby looked away awkwardly, pretending not to listen, though I could feel the weight of their curiosity. I could have ended the whole thing with one sentence. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I knew something Linda didn't. No. Something that would change everything. So instead, I stepped back, let her revel in her little power trip, and walked toward the exit under her watchful glare. She thought she'd won. She had no idea. Because in less than 24 hours, Linda would learn the truth. I wasn't just a visitor in this building. I owned it. That night, I barely thought about Linda's little scene in the lobby. If anything, it only made me more certain I'd made the right decision weeks ago. The papers were already signed, the funds transferred, and the ink on the deed was long since dry. The building, the very one Linda thought she ruled like a kingdom, was mine. But Linda didn't know that. Yet, the purchase had been quiet, almost surgical. I'd dealt directly with the prior owner, a weary man who'd grown tired of the constant complaints, the petty disputes, the endless HOA drama that seemed to radiate from one central source. He didn't name names, but I could read between the lines. I had kept my involvement discreet. No flashy announcements, no signs in the lobby, just the quiet power of a title deed tucked away in my office safe. The next morning, I arrived early, earlier than most residents before the lobby had fully woken up. The sunlight cut in through the high glass windows, stretching long shadows across the polished floors. I walked in casually, my key card gliding through the scanner with a satisfying beep. Linda was at her post, as always, sipping from a mug that proclaimed "La Boss Lady" in glittery gold letters. She froze mid-sip when she saw me. Her lips curled. into that thin, condescending smile that said she was already planning her next move. She wasted no time. She came striding over again, clipboard in hand this time, ready to read me a list of so-called infractions. Her voice was sharp, each word clipped like she was cutting paper with a pair of dull scissors. She told me she'd already informed management that I was trespassing yesterday and that appropriate action was being taken. I almost laughed at that. I could have stopped her right there. I could have reached into my bag, pulled out the deed, and watched her expression collapse in real time. But no, this needed to be more than a reveal. This needed to be an education. So I let her ramble. I let her feel like she was in control, the queen in her marble castle. Meanwhile, I made a mental note to schedule a meeting for the very next afternoon. A meeting that would involve Linda, the HOA board, and me, her new boss. The rest of the day was a slow burn. I worked quietly in my office suite upstairs, hearing occasional muffled echoes from the lobby below, her voice rising and falling as she lectured residents over the tiniest of imagined offenses. I realized she wasn't just irritating, she was driving people away. The building deserved better. By the time the sun began to set, I had everything ready. The emails were sent, the conference room reserved, and the board members informed. Tomorrow, Linda's little empire would start to crumble. She still didn't know that the man she had terminated yesterday would be the one sitting at the head of the table tomorrow, and I couldn't wait to see her face. The next afternoon, the conference room on the 12th floor was perfectly prepared. Polished mahogany table, neatly arranged bottled waters, the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting from the corner. The board members filed in one by one, each offering polite nods and curious glances toward me. They didn't know exactly why. This meeting had been called, only that it was urgent and involving building operations. Linda arrived last. She swept in as if she owned the place, a thick folder of papers clutched under one arm. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor, her smile poised, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't even look in my direction at first. She was too busy positioning herself at the far end of the table as though she intended to preside over the meeting. The chair at the head of the table remained empty. Until I took it, her eyes finally landed on me. A flicker of confusion, then irritation. She began to speak, but I raised my hand slightly, not to silence her, but to slow her. My words came out calm, deliberate, carrying just enough weight to settle the room. I explained that there had been a recent change in ownership, a significant change. From the corner of my eye, I watched Linda's posture shift. The confidence in her shoulders faltered just a fraction. She glanced toward the board members for reassurance, but they were already leaning forward, interested. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a set of documents, and placed them on the table. The deed, the purchase agreement, the notarized transfer of ownership, all official, all final. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Linda's face froze in a polite, strained smile, the kind that looks pleasant from a distance but is cracking at the edges. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She tried to recover, clearing her throat and launching into some long-winded justification for her security measures and visitor policy enforcement. But the damage was already done. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply stated the facts. Her conduct toward residents and guests had been inappropriate, her role had been grossly overstepped, and, as the new owner, I was making immediate changes to building management. Those changes, I explained, included replacing the current front desk oversight. Her glittery boss lady mug wouldn't be returning to the lobby. The board members didn't argue. They didn't even hesitate. In less than 10 minutes, Linda's reign over the marble-tiled kingdom was over. Security, real security, escorted her from the conference room. I thought that would be the end of it. But as she stormed out, her voice rose, spilling into the hallway. Threats, accusations, a string of words that drew curious stares from passers-by. She shoved the security officer's arm hard enough to leave no room for doubt. That was when the building's real security team stepped in. And by the time I left, the conference room, Linda wasn't just fired. She was being led out of the building in handcuffs. Her kingdom had fallen, and I was the one holding the keys.